So Mustafa, we're planning out our digital stories, and maybe we can just talk a little bit about the steps: selection, sequence, scripting.
Right.
So tell me about your thoughts on the first step, selection.
Okay, I think for me it's about, okay, I could either have a fully developed idea of what I want to do, or I could look at the photos I have already and see if they inspire me. I took the latter approach because, I took the approach because I didn't really know what to do a story about, but I knew I had all these great photos from Turkey. And there was a group of photos in particular that were like these panoramics that I took about this trip that I took to Selge, which is this ancient classical city in southern Turkey.
Yep.
So I had the photos, they were panoramic, they looked visually interesting, and I wanted to find photos that were visually interesting as well. And I looked at them and I studied them to see if there was a story that could come out of them. And what I found was that when we were there, we'd actually encountered a shepherd and his daughter, and they actually showed us around the area. And my wife developed a kind of a nice relationship with one of them, and she talked about her life and what she's going through and how she wants to actually get out of that area. And I thought that's an interesting message. Here we are in this beautiful exotic area, yet the people there, the poor villagers there, actually want to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a kind of a contradiction that was a real learning experience for myself and my wife.
Right.
And I have the photos that kind of speak to that. In fact, there's a couple in particular that really capture that moment. And so I think I have the beginnings of what could be a fairly interesting digital story.
Yeah, that sounds good.
How about yourself?
It's interesting. We're both doing travel stories.
It's true.
There's a lot more than just travel out there. But I also thought about a time in my life when I lived in Vietnam for a year, and I know there's just a million stories that come to mind.
Right.
But one of the things that really, as I started to think about this, the life on the streets there is very different than it is here, and I wanted to sort of talk about that and what it means for them as a culture and the locals and how they live. So I started to go through the photos that I had, that I took during my time there, and tried to find some examples of that, and that's basically where I'm at right now. So I don't really have. I do have sort of a theme in mind, and this photo kind of talks to that theme about how resourceful the locals are, and
Right.
because they're not rich people, they're not, it's a developing country, so there's
Right.
still a lot, there aren't people can afford a motorbike or a bicycle, they can't afford a car,
Right.
so that kind of, that's sort of where I'm at with the sequencing.
Well, it's interesting how you mentioned you had one photo that really speaks to your theme.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how we have to sort of develop the rest of the story. Once you have the photos in mind, how do you develop them into a story? I think what we should do is lay them all out on a table,
Yeah.
and try to find what we think is a beginning and a middle and an end that kind of points to that one image that really speaks the most to your theme. And for me, it's the one of my
So
life.
we've got into
Yeah.
the sequencing part of it now.
Right,
So
yeah.
this is step 2, right? Just to go back to step 1, the pictures I selected spoke to me, and they I thought were visually interesting too.
Right.
So that was something that I liked. But now let's talk about sequencing, because I think that's the next step.
It's all about a narrative arc, meaning you want to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, that's what a good story has.
Mm-hmm.
So I located what I think is one or two photos that really capture that moment, and it's the one with my wife speaking with this poor shepherd woman.
Right.
And then there's another photo of her actually looking out over the landscape, reflecting.
Right.
And I think what I want to do is have my story move towards those photos, and then talk about how in that photo we learned something about this human being, this individual
Right.
out in Turkey. And so I think that's what we really need to do, is to develop a kind of a shape to the
Right.
story, a narrative shape.
So I'm seeing the scripting and the sequencing. Step 2, sequencing. Step 3, scripting. Kind of being blended in a little bit, because you're
Right.
gonna, in your head, you're already writing the script a little bit.
Yep.
And you're picking out the pictures as you go.
Right. The
Right.
last step being, once you have what you think is a narrative flow,
Right.
then you go in and you put in your narration, a few sentences for each photo that kind of lead in a way. It can be a meandering way, but it kind of leads to that one image that captures the moment. And I think it's going to be a really rewarding and fun process.
Yeah, it's going to be a good story. Cool.
Looking forward.
Good.